Hey everyone, today we're going to jump into bag 3, which is your rear end assembly. Some notes on step 1. Obviously we talked about do not over tighten the screws. On the left hand side axle tube, we have two different ball studs here. We got one 3mm and then 4mm. The 4mm are all going to be used here, but we just want to pay attention that we use that 3mm. And what we did here is we organized all our stuff in our pit tray. So we got our 3mm here, 4mm here. We even organized the screws. We got our 6mm and 10mm, got our bearings over there. So let's jump into it. Okay, first step, we're gonna take the left-hand side axle tube and install the ball studs. So grab that 3mm ball stud and screw it in. Now you want to make sure that you don't have any space between the axle tube and the ball stud. Next, we're going to take the 4mm ball stud and screw it in here. And then make sure there's no gap. And then since we have this in our hand, we're going to check for any flashing. That's what this assembly note is. Make sure there's no flashing in here. This one looks really good. If there is, you can just take a hobby knife and just carefully take out any flashing that might be in there. But this part looks great. So next step, we're going to take our flange bearing. We're going to take our spacer, put it over the bearing, and then install it. And what I'd like to do is just press it onto the table. And there you have it. All right, next up, we got the right-hand side. So again, just pay attention to the orientation of everything. Make sure it's like that in the manual, and you are good. So make sure you put your ball studs in the right locations. Obviously, this is pretty straightforward, right? You wouldn't want to put the ball stud on this side, only on this side. Again, making sure that when you screw that in to the tube, that there is no gap between the ball stud hex and the tube. So there's your assembly. Oh, let's put the bearing in. There's no shim on this side. So you just push the bearing in, goes in nice and easy. You push it flat on the table, make sure it's seated. And there you have it. There is step 1. Okay, moving on to step 2 of bag 3, we are going to take that right-hand axle tube and install it into the right-hand gear case. So first step is we got the gear case here. We got our last 3mm ball stud, and that is going to get installed here. And it's really important that you use the 3mm ball studs where they're supposed to be. The problem is if you do use the longer ones, it can yield the plastic, push through, and possibly hit the rear axle shaft. The same thing with this guy from the last step. All right, so then we are going to take our axle tube, and then again, just pay attention to your orientation. I mean, that's where you're going to have a successful build. So the ball stud goes, so you can see here the orientation, right? The ball stud's over this way. Making sure you have that right. So we are going to use the 6mm screws here. And just tighten that down until you see the gap close up. Probably should have done it this way the first time. Install the screw on the wrench and then put it in there. And again, just get that gap to close up. You don't got to torque these down until you feel the plastic and everything tighten up. You're good to go. All right, on to step 3. So let's see here. We're going to be taking the assembly we just completed. We're going to be installing a bearing right here. Obviously installing the rear axle, shaft, and gear, and then putting the center gear case on. So we have our bearings here. Bearing goes in there like that. One easy way, if you can't get, you have some big fingers and you can't get that in there, take your compound gear. You can use that as a leverage point, and you can just push that in like so. Pushing it nice. Okay, so you're good there. So we're always talking about the orientation here. You can see with the rear axle, shaft, and gear, you can see that right there. You can barely see the long side of it. Just make sure you're installing this correctly. Short side goes over here. So install that. And then you're going to take the center gear case, and we're going to install that on there. And then just to get everything set, you're going to take a 6mm, and this kind of helps the build process to put the other screws in. So you're going to install this screw first. And then you're going to get 3 more of those screws. And we're going to install those on the back side here. Again, you're just going to be tightening that down enough just to where you see that gap close up. All right. So with this step, we installed a 6mm there, and then 3 more here. All right, on to step 4. So now we're going to take the other side. We're going to install that bearing in here. It's going to go in the center. It's pretty easy to kind of get that in there, but if you want to, because there is more space for your fingers, but you can take your compound gear, press it in like so. Make sure that's seated. And then we're going to take the compound gear, install it in. Take our gear case assembly. There we have it. And then we're going to need 3 of the 6mm screws. Tell you what, that pitch rate is nice, keeping you organized instead of parts rolling around the table. Again, you just want to tighten that down to where you just see the gap close up. There you go. So you do have a little gap down here that'll get taken care of once you install the motor. All right, on to step 5. We're going to install the other axle tube. So again, the key is paying attention to your orientation. Put that on there. And then you're going to take 2 of the 10mm screws. So when we say pay attention to orientation, obviously you don't want that like that. You want it like this. Both of these ball studs pointing that way because that's where your shocks are going to go later on in the assembly. And this is where like the long handled wrench is really nice that we included here, the hex tip. You have plenty of space. Get that screw in there. Again, just a nice snug fit to where you see the gap close up. And you're good. On to the next step, we're going to be doing the motor installation. We have our rear end assembly all built, ready to go. We have some steps here that you need to follow in order. So first is going to be installing the wheel pin into the axle, followed by the hex. You're going to do that on both sides. And then you're going to install the panhard bar here. All right. So just try to get that pin centered as close as you can on the bearing. And then pay attention to the slot in the hex. Obviously you don't want to put it on like that because you'll never get it on. So pay close attention to that and then just push it on. We're going to do the same to the next side. Keep that centered. Pay attention to orientation of the slot in the hex and push it on. All right, third step here, we're going to install the panhard bar. There you have it. All right, so you will notice that there is some slop in the, not slop, but play in the axle. That is fully by design. We do that to keep the rear end nice and free. One thing you will notice that the play will eventually become less as you work on the car. These hexes, the pins will sink into the hex just a little bit with the plastic yielding, but there will always be a little bit of play in there. All right, so you got that all done. Before we put our motor in, a good thing to check is make sure your rear end spins nice and free. So you can see that's really good. If not, you can come back here. If it doesn't spin like that, you can come back in here, loosen those screws, back them off a quarter of the turn or so to give you a little bit more spin. All right, next step is we are going to install the motor. One of the things that we do have here, obviously we're talking about not bending the wires in the motor. It's very critical. If you do break those wires, you could short out the motor. So just never bend it in this area. Obviously you can bend it up here, that's fine, but just not in this heat shrink area. And then we kind of show you how you want that motor orientation in the car. Okay, so get our motor plate here. I'm going to line that up first, like so. Take the motor, just like the diagram shows, install it in there. You're going to take your 10mm screw, and find the hole. There we go. So just get that started. Don't need to tighten it down right yet until you get the other screw in. You just want to snug those. The gear mesh is already set and you're good. All right, so just like the manual shows, we got that orientation correct. There you have it. There is your final assembly for bag 3.